Hello lads, I'm Ant and this is my review for round 2 of the RaceTrackDesigns subreddit 20k competition. So following on from round 1, again we'll be dabbling in grade 1 facilities, but this time it will be redesigns of circuits either completely made from scratch or heavily modified by Herman Tilke. So the eligible circuits are Sepang, Bahrain, Shanghai, Hockenheim, Red Bull Ring, Korea, Austin, Buddha, Mexico City, Istanbul, and Fuji. Along with the secondary requirements as well, so you can't go too crazy with it. Got to be some semblance of the original circuit. And fortunately for us, I believe it was Whimsical Calamari has been kind enough to condense all the entries into one Imgur album, so I will be taking great advantage of that. Very helpful too, because as you can see here, I've got all the tracks up on this tab as well, so I can look at the actual real life layout and compare it to these. And I want to note this is my second take of doing this. The first take I was it wasn't it. I was tired and I was wearing out, and I was originally going to do it in 2 parts, but no, I think I'm going to start from scratch. So these first entries I have seen before, so I might go a bit faster, maybe miss some stuff I mentioned the first time, but I guess let's get going. So this first one is a redesign of Sepang by Gear number 7. And I almost forgot to mention the album itself. It has the redesigns, of course, but it also has the details of what's actually been changed as well, which makes them easier for us. So what changes has he made? He's changed T1, which of course used to be... Wow, these corners actually have names. Didn't know. So it basically straight lines up to here, which I'm not sure if it's better than the original corner you had, but I like this. I think it works. I think it might be a bit awkward elevation rise because I believe it drops off a bit, but there's probably the money to make sure it's not an issue. So yeah, I'm alright with this change. Actually, what's have you done with the pit exit? Does it? Okay, it does exit that late in the original circuit, because I'm thinking that's a bit questionable, but since it's there in the original circuit, I won't hold that against you specifically. Though I feel like you maybe could take that into account. I think another thing as well is that it connects into the original turn 3 maybe a bit weirdly, because that section of corner wasn't designed like for in that in mind. Like it was designed for the original turn 2 still coming out here, so the connection's a bit weird, but I don't think it really matters. Other changes made the original turn 9 wider, so which one's that? That'd be the second hairpin. It's not just you've made it wider, you've made it a lot more open. Did you mean to say more open? Again, elevation could be nasty because I believe it rises up at that point and somewhat steeply actually. So I should be looking at your justifications too. So for T1, okay, I'm not so sure about that. You said it's a change you're making just for the sake of change and no actual proper reason behind it, which I don't gel with. I can give you a reason here. It's because the original T12 section, even though the track overall is very wide, it is rather tight. And this just makes it a lot more open. probably better for like the first lap, especially with T2 being quite tight. Like it works fine, but this works better for an opening lap. Now you've made T9 wider, so there's less repeated braking, which I don't believe is an issue because the corner itself, even on the original layout, is fairly unique with the rise coming out the corner and the somewhat tight right-hander afterwards, especially if you're making T1 a lot faster and removing that section. I don't think you don't really need to be making this change, at least under the justification you're bringing, because I don't think it's repetitive in that scenario at all. As for the corner itself, you've been a bit lazy with the runoff, but the corner itself I think is fine. I think it makes the exit rather interesting actually, especially if there is that big elevation change there. It makes the line to the next corner interesting as well. It's actually, looking at that closer, what's the similar segment like 1 or 2 turns ago? Was it T4? Because this section here, that's not the case for even a moment. So I don't understand that. So yeah, and then you've made changes to all layers as well. This change here and this change here are the only actual changes. Shorter layout. South circuit is slightly wider. Let's take a look at that there. I can see the width there. That's changed. You actually meant wider this time. That's a good thing. It looks like you've gotten rid of that weird kink here as well, which I'm also a fan of. Like, that's just weird and it serves as a slight bottleneck of somewhat. And then you've rounded out the North Circuit as well, which I don't know. Certainly an interesting corner, but it feels like it goes on for ages, and especially if you've used the justification earlier that you've changed something because it's repetitive, and you've kind of done the same thing with this new section, just how long it goes so on for, which is a weird choice to me. Let's take a look at the original run too. It's a lot more squared out. In fairness, I don't mind the change to the start. Like I would ignore this kink here and I just have the right-hander here at least. So I will call it a little more flowing though. Better to drive. It's debatable. So overall, this isn't bad, not by a long shot. It doesn't change much, but that's fine because sometimes you don't really need to change much. But your justifications for the changes, I'm not sure. Again, this just feels like you're trying to get an entry in. That's eligible. Like you're making the bare minimum of changes, like, and not actually putting any real reasoning behind it. You're just saying, I'm changing this part because I want it to be changed. Nothing else. So yeah, hardly bad, but I would almost call it a bit lazy. Especially if you look at the presentation is fairly basic. So next one is Sean, who has redesigned Mexico City. So he's opened up turn 3. I agree with that. I feel like you want to open up the whole section rather than just the end of it, especially since I think T2 might even be a tad more of a bottleneck than it is now, but I think it's a step in the right direction at least. I think the Mexico City as is, that turn 1 to 3 complex, is just far too tight for an opening complex. Like you're begging for trouble, and you don't really want that. You want it to be challenging, but you don't want to make it like it's a junkyard on the first lap, which a section like that, like you can see here, even with the widening at the apex, it just lends itself towards that. And then other changes, T45, a bit more flowing. Interesting choice to have it widen on the inside of the exit. Like, I don't think you need to do that. I don't see any car really using it unless you somehow go for a switchback there. But it's not bad. I won't hold it against you. I can definitely see it more flowing as well. Maybe it works as is. Maybe it needs refinement. It's hard to tell from just a top-down image. You need to actually be able to drive that to make sure you've got it just right. But I can see the concept you're going for, and that concept works. So other changes, T10 is more open. So that's the second last part. Oh no, is it? You've made it you say you've made T10 a bit more open, but as a consequence, T1 is more tighter, I think. And the gap between T9 and T10 as well, I don't think that flows as well because you straighten out a bit more here. Like, say here, for example, the actual S's, you barely straighten out at all. Like, the moment you're turning to the left, you're already pretty much setting up the right hand, turning for the next right-hander. And this has got a bit of a straight here, which it's not necessarily bad, but I feel like it does detract from the flow a tad. And I feel like the section you're placing it with, the tightening at T11 especially, I'm not sure if that's really an improvement in general. And you said it allows the DRS zone to be earlier as part of that, which, yeah, I can see that kink's less severe. I'm not sure if it matters because you don't really pass there anyway. But it's not a terrible justification. Worst comes to worst, you just blame the cars. Because you always have a point there. And then redesign the stadium section to be more like the Formula E section. Again, the widening there, it's not going to do much for F1. In other series, yeah, I can perhaps see that if they can follow closely enough and go up the inside for a stand. It would be difficult, but you could definitely get it done. And I think it would look fairly spectacular, actually. As for how it drives, that, yeah, again, interesting braking zone because you're turning while braking, and it could be awkward, but I feel like, again, it's like the Hawkeye section. To make sure you've got it just right, you need to be able to actually drive it. You can't. I don't think you can really get it bang on just from a 2D image, but I can see the concept you're going for, and I like that concept. I think it works fine if you can get it, if you can refine it correctly. So yeah, not bad. I feel like there's stuff you can do better, but overall, I think it's fine. Hard to tell if it's an improvement, but this is fine. I don't mind it. Then another Mexico City redesign by HairpinTrackDesign, our boy Uprooted. And you've decided to shitpost. Oh, that's so silly. I appreciate you trying to go for something out the box. I will say that outright. That said, it is an interesting section, of course, but racing-wise, you can't do this. Interesting as the section it looks on paper, you're just putting it in the middle of the only straight where you're going to see actual passing. And that's the big downside with this. You're just not going to really see any passing anymore because the straight's right barely 600 meters now. Well, we'll say 700. We'll give it a bit of a benefit because of the kinks before. It makes the approach faster than it would after a regular corner, but you just won't see any passing anymore into the old T1, T3. But look, as for how it actually drives, this right-hander would be very interesting because I think it would be flat in an F1 car, at least the beginning, but maybe barely, especially since it tightens up on exit. And then you've got a fast curve braking zone as well, where the left side tires have just got so much load. I'd love to see a hot lap of that, actually, because getting that braking right would be so difficult. And then it's a long right-hander afterwards. I think getting the line through this section would be very difficult. And then these kinks would be interesting too, because you've got this left kink that's going uphill, and then this right-hander kink, which is actually, I assume, would be dropping away as you turn through, which would be a thrill to drive, really. Though, as I said, of course, this being the middle of the straight compromises overtaking, and this turn 2 section especially gets in the way of the paddock. Now, I don't know how much of the infield F1 actually uses as paddock, but I assume it would use this section used by T2 and T3. And I imagine it would be very, very packed, but inconveniently so, if you were to take these areas away. And I'm not sure how they deal with that, because access, I don't think, would really exist there. I can't see a tunnel on the satellite. We'll go to the satellite all the way down here. There is satellite, right? Why is this all in the way? What are you doing? The hell is this? I don't like this. Okay, there is a tunnel there. I'll give you that. But that is a singular tunnel. And it's blocked off by T2. So, yeah. Feasibility is just a no-go here. And you've changed T1 as well, which I think makes... It opens out the complex a bit more, which I like. But especially since you've compromised overtaken already, I don't think you can really bring it forward. I think you have to actually push it out slightly, which you can afford to do since the approach speed will be less. Since, of course, you've encroached onto the straight. And I think the right hand needs to be slightly longer, like a bit more than 90 degrees, and then I'll leave it up to interpretation from the left and right. I wouldn't do what the actual circuit has done. Some might. I won't say that one way of doing it is especially right or wrong. Just how it is. And then the final section, the hawk here, has changed as well. Makes it a bit more like the old one, where coming out of the old T5, you're more accelerating through the hawk here, which I like. Again, this is a section where I think it needs a bit more refining, which is hard to do in 2D. I like the concept. I think I would have the ADI decrease slightly on exit, just so maybe it flows a bit nicer that way, and you have a bit more runoff on the outside as well, which could be beneficial. I think it makes the run as slightly more interesting as well, because it'd be faster. So yeah, interesting concept. I've got to give you kudos for doing something a bit different. But different isn't necessarily good, and I think that's the case here, I'm afraid. This sort of section, I believe it works, but it doesn't work in the way you've done it here. But I suspect you're aware of that too, so whatever. Now this one is Secret Lemonade Drinkers Coda, who has changed Sector 3. and T11 as well. I'll start with T11 first. You've opened that because the other two hairpins are a bit similar. Yeah, I don't mind that. Hard to tell what you mean by opening it. Like, well, I take that back. It's fairly easy. No, I agree with that. You're not really passing to T11 anyway, so why not make it at least an F1? Why not even another series? If you could pass there, you'd probably either want to pass a T12 anyway. So yeah, opening it up is justifiable. I don't mind that. I think the apexes on the Coda hairpins are a bit tight anyway. I mean, they'd be fine, but because they widen up heading into the apex itself is super tight, and I'm not a fan of that generally. So, as for the actual changes, they are T13 to T15 because getting too many slow corners there. I agree with that justification. I don't really like this section here. I won't say it doesn't work, but I don't really gel with it all that much. T15 especially, it's a challenging corner, but it's very awkward and it can just feel tedious with the other slow corners there. What you've done, hard to tell if there's enough space between T13 and T14 to help with switchback and racing, which is what you've said you wanted to do, and that's the best way to approach this, I think. And T15 Titans, I kind of maybe there should be more space racing rides, though I don't think you can really do that much anyway. I think driving through it is fine. And I can't tell how you're supposed to exit this. Like, it almost looks like you run up against like the first kink of the non-Istanbul section, which is T. Well, I don't bloody know. Whoever did the coda numbering can't count for shit. We'll say T16. I think that was it. It almost looks like you exit on the first apex of that, which should change the whole line through there, which is interesting. I think I like it that way. Even if it doesn't, I don't think the Istanbul section is really compromised greatly. So again, not many changes made, but that's not a bad thing. These changes work, I think. I need to consider this a bit more again. It's that you need to double check for sure with actually driving it, which you can't really do in a 2D image. So yeah, not bad. I don't mind it. It's not blazing any trails, but it doesn't necessarily need to. On the subject of trailblazing, though, this is Sylvan's Buddh International Circuit, and ooh yeah, I like this one. Double bridge, and the layout just works so good as well, I think. Let's look at the changes. After T4, you head sharply downhill through T5. That'd feel mecha to drive, and then T6 as well. Or you'd still be going downhill there, and it'd be flat out, I think, but it's fairly on the limit, and that'd be so good to get right. And then you come out of the tunnel into T7 and 8, which would also be on the limit to. Again, I think it's flat or barely flat, but you need to be absolutely pinpoint precise so you go for the track, and I love that. This section works so well. I'm not sure about T9 and 10 here. I think they work all right, but they kind of lower down the ante a bit after that section. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it feels like they lowered down the ante here, while still feigning the appearance of keeping it up. And I don't really know about it. I'm not sure what I'd do in this case. It's a bit awkward trying to link it back up to T11. Yeah, I'm not sure. And then these S's here too. They're meandering. They're kind of just there to get you from point A to point B. I'm not sure if there's a space to keep the original T13 and 14, but I'd be very tempted to. Though at the same time, you could argue it's just repetitive since we've already had a few of those really balls to the wall sections. Maybe you're overdoing a bit if you've got that back there. I don't know. I would have been tempted to keep it anyway. And instead, he's turned into an overtaking zone to T13, which is, yeah, that's fine. I don't think you're passing there in F1, but yeah, that's fine, whatever. I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm not sure about the kinks afterwards. I'm sure they're fine to drive, but I feel like I want to push the hairpin out slightly and have the run a bit more smooth. Push the hairpin out if I can. It looks like you're just about using all the space, which is probably why those kinks exist in the first place, which is, yeah, alright, fine. I don't mind that. Or you'd probably be going downhill as well, which makes them a bit more interesting. And I want to say I think I prefer the kinks there than no kinks, because then it's just a bit of a bland corner. Oh, I swear I'm not tired, but I'm yawning. Weird. And this is far from a boring track either. It's very interesting. And then T15, C16. Yeah, they're there to do the job. They don't stand out, but in this case, they don't need to. That's a solid final section. It's fine as is. It doesn't need to do more. So, overall, it's brilliant. You've made a batshit insane concept, and that's not the only thing. The thing is, you've pulled it off so well. I think the worst thing about it isn't actually the main layout itself. It's this shorter layout, which feels a bit tighter than it needs to be. Like, I understand there's not much to do with this first hairpin, but the second one, you can do more of that. It should be more than just a hairpin, really. But yeah, that's very, very good. That's a memorable track. This will be one a lot of people vote for, I think. And before we move on, I feel like I owe Sylvain I owe him actual words. I owe him the need to actually be able to craft and construct a sentence. That's what. No, but I think I'll try out this quote. Why not? Buddh International Circuit redesign. The track to race against all tracks and win the race on the track against all the other tracks on the racetrack. You are welcome. Now we are on to Zizzleswift's Fuji Speedway. What changes? Right in T1 to get the cars more side by side. I mean, yeah, alright. I can see what you're going for there. I won't call it bad, but I think that hairpin's fine as is for that anyway. Not really a necessary change. I think you'll get cars side by side into that corner just about as much as you will in the actual layout. Maybe what you want to do is make the radius for T2 less tight, not necessarily change T1, but change the turn 2 kink. Which personally I would be hesitant with myself, but maybe that's the way to do things. Then you've changed T3, made it go on for a lot longer. Have a higher entry speed for speed for downforce cars. I mean, it's more open at least, but because the corner carries on for longer, it almost looks slower. Honestly. Then 100R, same reasoning, high entry speed to continue side-by-side racing. I will admit that this does better for side-by-side racing than the current Coca-Cola corner, because it's kind of just a one-liner thing. You're going side-by-side there isn't easy. So I'll give it that. Side-by-side racing, I'm not I mean, yeah, right. I think getting side-by-side racing through this section is more reliant on the previous corner than that corner itself. You don't need to change this corner to really make it better, unless the run out of Coca-Cola is really awkward. And again, because of this early part especially, you say you want to make it a high entry speed, but I think it's actually slower. And then the hairpin carries on a bit longer here as well, redone. Apex seems really awkward to negotiate in its current state. I feel like it could be worse. You've made it worse since you're having to really try and really hurry getting back across to the right hand side of the track for that hairpin. I don't know. I feel like it's not really an issue with the current corner. Maybe you've made it a tad worse there. Though that said, I haven't driven Fuji for a while, so maybe you've got a point with how the hairpin as is. And I can somewhat see that because there's the hairpin and then it opens out and then it kind of tightens back in again. That's more of a width thing than anything, I think. And at T8. Yeah. Want to recreate the original Fuji, so Dunlop is opened. I like that. And you've bypassed nets and gone straight to Panasonic. Which again, it's fine. I would do it differently, but I suppose that's fine. If, and only if, you ignore the chicane here. And I want to say I do agree with the philosophy behind here. Fuji's third section as is. I won't call it bad, but it does not fit Fuji. Fuji's supposed to be a high-speed blast through the Japanese countryside. Filling it all in switchbacks is kind of not it. Though in saying that too, half the corners are hairpins, so... But they're not really following each other, so... Yeah. As I was saying about this chicane, do not do this chicane. That's a bad chicane. It's a run-liner. It looks awkward to get right, especially depending on how you've done the curbs. Like, if you don't want people running over the curbs, that looks like an extremely awkward chicane. And much like this chicane here on the actual layout, it's not necessary. I think you've got the space up here to ignore it. Now you said elevation could be a concern here, so that's why the chicane is there, which, yeah, I can understand that, but why can't you make the chicane better? Like, this feels like a slap job effort, which, if you're redesigning, you should not really have that sort of thing there. Unless you really know what you're doing and you're just having a bit of fun, so you can as inject it allowed, but that's not the case here, I believe. And that's a whole other scenario, really. Yeah. And the actual chicane here serves more purpose than the chicane you've made, because at least you can argue this chicane here makes it easier for overtakes, awkward as it is to drive. This doesn't really do anything. You say safety, maybe you are right there. But it's just a half-assed effort. You can do more than that. Not to mention, having to put that chicane, they kind of... I know there was a chicane on that corner, the original corner, before the redesign. But even that, I think, fits in more than this. This is just... You've redesigned the section completely under the justification front ideology, and then one little change you've added completely betrays all that, and I don't really like it. So for these changes, most of them, I think it feel like changes for the sake of changes. Maybe that's not the case, since you've used justifications for all of them, but it kind of seems that way to me. And the one change you actually have a point in, you've betrayed the point yourself. So, I'm not feeling it with that one. Let's have a quick water break here for our username's Korea International Circuit. Yummy, yummy, in my tummy, there is a typo right here. Good start. So, new complex changes, new complex between turns 3 and 4, 3 consecutive straights when up overtaking. I agree with that philosophy. That's the problem with, like, say, Bahrain, for example, where you've got 3 big straights in a row. You ask any driver at all what straight they want to get the pass done by, they will say at the end of the third. Because if they get the pass done at the end of the first or the end of the second straight, it gives the drivers they pass a chance to get back at them straight away. And Yeongam Korea has somewhat of that problem. Not to the same extent, I don't think, though, because I don't think anyone will really be close to passing T1 a lot of the time. The T2 straight is a very good length, I think, for passing. And then T3, and then the first straight, I think, is just short enough where re-overtaking is possible, but the leading driver can defend as well if they know their stuff. So I understand the concept you're going for, the justification you're going for. That is a legitimate concern, but I'm not so sure this actually is a problem for this circuit. As for the section itself, it's kind of just lazy because it just connects with the alt layouts. And the floor especially with what would be the new T6, T7, that's just weird. I would for sure open up T4 and T5, T6. How I change T6 depends on how I change the 2 corners before it. And then I would absolutely make, I think this is T7 faster. Because you've just got a 90 there, and that's just... Otherwise, and that's just so awkward. Other changes, bigger radii in T6. And T5 as well, actually. I don't need that tab. Yeah, alright, that's fine. I think it makes it harder to switch back. But I think it just flows a bit nicer as well, so... It's a compromise, but it's a fine compromise. I won't mind it. Again, it's the sort of section where to find that compromise, you need to be able to drive the section. And more than actually race through it to get what you want. With 2D, it's hard. I didn't realize how much of a reoccurring thing that'd be, but it is. It probably will be for other tracks down this list. And then other changes. New complex T9, T10. Don't do this. Please, don't do this. That is an extremely awkward hairpin to just plonk right in the middle of what is otherwise a rather flowing section. Okay, maybe not as flowing as I originally thought, but still, it's got a decent amount to it. Point is, it just throws a 1994 chicane of sorts into the mix. It's just completely in the way and doesn't need to exist at all, and just looks awkward to drive. Like, because the hairpin's tight enough, it is, but the hairpin itself isn't the worst thing. It's the corner after it, because it means you have to take that hairpin so much more tighter, and it just feels awkward and weird. Now, granted, after that corner, this exiting right-hander here, it actually feels nice, and honestly, it does loop well back onto, what is that, T11, T12. It loops back nicely onto that section. And especially, you don't need to be adding this when you're adding this sort of section as well. It means you've got... I know it helps that we'll get to this last change here, that you have removed a somewhat technical section, but you've got 3 of these on your track, and that's kind of too much. I won't say too much per se, because as with anything, it's a general rule. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you can make it work, but in this case it doesn't. I don't think. It just feels... all the sections is different, sure, but I feel like you get to a point where it just feels tedious. And the last change, it bypasses a couple corners, goes straight to... it bypasses T13. Yeah, that's fine. That makes T14, T15 very interesting, actually. I think you have to modify the runoff here. So that's the point, actually. I haven't really looked at the runoff for a lot of these tracks. I probably won't. Lay out some more fun. But yeah, that's a troublemaker section in the sense that it's potentially unsafe. But to drive that, it'd be very interesting and potentially quite enjoyable. Like that fast kink and then immediately onto the brakes, which is a curved braking zone into a left, and you barely get a brake after that as you head into the next couple corners. It could be really awkward and a bitch, or it could be absolutely brilliant if you get it right. Seems very hard to tell. Again, you'd have to drive it. But overall, some changes I like or don't mind, but others you're just adding too much, and it gets in the way. It makes it all cluttered. Simplicity can be a beautiful thing at times, and that's a lesson I think you need to learn here. Then Tiger has redesigned Hockenheim. So big space in the middle of the track. Why not use it? Well, funny you should mention that. Short layout, driver training center, paddock. My friend, it is being used quite excellently, as is. So really, that's a non-issue. But yeah, fine. We'll also ignore how this layout tramples over all of that. Kind of just gets in the way of everything. But yeah, whatever. And also want to check something. It looks like... I can't tell if T1 is like that in the actual layout, or you've changed it, or it's hard to tell. Hock T1 is just weird, man. They should make it more like the original was. More open, I think, less chance of accidents. Specifically, I won't do here. We're not here for that sort of thing. So as for the new section itself, I think open this part, this kink here. This section is very hard to tell. It's hard to tell whether it's awkward or it's just right and he's put the corners in all the right places. I can definitely see what he wants to do here, and I like that. But once again, you need to actually be able to drive a car through here and determine what you need to change. If there needs to be a change to be made, if you've got it right the first go, you need to change sections slightly. Another one of those sections. You find it more interesting, which, yeah, you're right. But you don't necessarily need to do it. It's not, sometimes a break is the best thing you can make for a layout. Because you had a DRS zone in the back straight. Problem is, I don't feel like you really see passing there, even if the straight beforehand, which lets you get close. I'm not feeling for the chicane here. It's more so it's unnecessary than the chicane itself is bad. Honestly, if you make the straight here twice as long, I think, and maybe scale the chicane up slightly, I think that's a rather good chicane, honestly. I don't believe it works here, but that's hardly a bad chicane, and I think you should use it elsewhere for sure in a more suitable place. At this point, I think personally, I'd be very tempted to just cut my losses and then do what old Hock did, 300k one into the monodrome. That'd be so good to drive as well, especially with the downforce that current F1 cars have. Going through that would be brilliant. Probably unsafe. I won't say it wouldn't meet grade 1 regs because I don't know. Hockenheim has the historic factor and it might get a pass from that, honestly. But so I can understand why the chicane's there, at least for more than a passing reason, but still, I would be very tempted to bypass it. It's also just weird that there's not an actual tarmac bypass, especially since you can't really use the drag strip anymore. Unless that's temporary gravel, but I assume not. So, yeah. I will call these unnecessary changes, but not necessarily bad. I think you want... I prefer the original Hockenheim, I think, over this. But that said, please use both of these concepts elsewhere, because they definitely work. Not here necessarily, but they do work. And then we're on to Shanghai by letters. Oh boy, so T5 is a straight because you wanted to make a change for the sake of making a change. Not bad, but perhaps a bit mundane. Maybe. Certainly what we've actually got here is a bit more interesting with the T5 King. And I think because the run... is the run shorter? Well, it probably actually would be because you don't have that kink anymore, and that helps increase the layouts. So. And I'd almost say it makes it a bit harder to sand because the line's different. Like, of course, you've got T5 here, you're coming along to the outside, and then someone can send it down the inside, which I believe was it 2016 and Ricardo took great advantage of that in that race. Then, alright, other changes. T8 to T10 complex was a little dull, so place some S's, putting the focus on downforce and grip, which if you look here, it was already the case. Maybe you could call it dull, I wouldn't. Sure, they're fairly flat radii, but it's kind of lasts for just about as long as they need before they throw something else at you. So I don't know, and what you've replaced it with, frankly. This section here, that just looks so awkward. This right-hand kink especially, just... I was gonna call it a little word. Fuck it, I'll say it. It's kind of AIDS, really. I don't know if YouTube likes that word, but hey, fuck it, too late. Yeah, it just looks like a bitch to drive after this. It just gets in the way so much. I would hate driving it. No, I don't like that. And then T11 to T13 is flipped because you can. And this almost makes you think it's more of a shitpost than anything else. Well, I must be told, like, doing this flip for no reason at all. Yeah, and it does make the runner to the back straight interesting because you've got to pick the right place to turn in, but you've already got this in like the T1 to T4 complex, so it's hardly anything new. And then the final hairpin is brought in shortening the two straights, which I don't think you really need to do. Maybe it makes the hairpin to the final corner section, connects it a bit more, makes it feel a bit more maybe flowing, but I don't know. Again, all of these are changes made for the sake of changes and not really for the better. I'm not really a fan. I feel like I should address this point here, but I really don't want to. I'm gonna be brutal here. I don't think this track is really worth the time of trying to say why you're wrong here, or anything along the lines of that. And now this is NoiseyGiraffe's coda redesign, and he has flipped the direction. First round of these in this comp, and that's interesting. Again, same with the earlier coda design. Main issue was the repetitive first section, which again I agree with. And you decided the most optimal course of direction was to flip the layout entirely. Which, yeah, alright, sure. Something different. And wanted to keep in with the theme of the circuit as well, which is copying iconic corners. So, like, there's the Hockenheim. That's fine. So, there's the Hockenheim section here, there's the Silverstone section, there's Istanbul here. So you say these corners are supposed to be a homage to Road America. I think they're a bit too tight to really accomplish that. Though that's hardly saying they're bad. I would in fact open T2 slightly, though I think what you've got here works as well. T3 and 4 would be interesting. Because I think you, especially for getting the right, because obviously you want an apex here, but where do you place the car for this section? Do you want to be on the outside here? Do you want to be on the middle? It's difficult to tell. Of course, once you actually drive it, it's not too, wouldn't be too much of a challenge, but it's interesting nonetheless. So, in keeping with the Silverstone homages, you made this look like Luffield, which, yeah, that's interesting. I feel like maybe it's a tad too tight, like maybe Kink comes out of here instead. Hairpin there, obviously, it's far more tighter than the section of Silverstone, but maybe you want to try and make this bit more open somehow. Maybe. I think it's fine as is. Course open slightly heading into that corner as well, which I do like. Because you can actually take advantage of them the first lap. Might get your E-pass down the back straight, but it's there. Well, first lap, because it's first lap, I think some will take advantage of it, because then maybe they all go into single file by the time they hit that kink there, but maybe not. Then you can take advantage of stuff there. I almost feel like you want to make this corner cambered. Yeah, moving on. And the S's are modified slightly, as well as the hairpin. Wish I could kind of overlay here, but I mean, there probably is a way, but I'm too lazy, so getting out the S's here. Nukes T9. I think this approach would be interesting because you've got the two kinks and then it's heading downhill, so hitting this left-hander right would be a challenge, and especially if you get it wrong, you're compromised for literally the rest of the lap. And I feel like I do this back end slightly as well, because you're throwing a bit too many S's in there. Like maybe after this kink here just keeps on going left, and then you've got a left-right switch that sets you up for this penultimate corner. It gives you a bit more time as well to think about going for a move into the last corner. Which I like this. And speaking of the last corner, I do very much like this as the chance to get a last-minute move in. I don't see it really happening for F1 or even most motor racing series, car racing series, because of the essence before and how much dirty air it generate and how much the car would just really heat up following someone. But for motorcycle racing, this would work exquisitely. I really do like it. So overall, interesting concept. You've made it work. There's some things I would do differently, but I won't really hold that against you because what you've done as well, I think it works all right as well. Now on to Charlie Sen's Fuji Speedway. Oh, I'm gonna have a bit more water. So he wants to use the old first section again. Alrighty, interesting. I'm not feeling it here. I don't know. It's hard to tell if this flows really well or it's just super tedious. It just looks ugly. Like not to say it drives bad or anything, but from a top-down perspective, it just doesn't look right. I think at least for the first lap, this section just doesn't work because there's bottlenecks all over the place. It's pretty much just one line, and if you stray from that, you're really screwed. Maybe that's what I'm seeing wrong with this. I think this corner there maybe is a bit tighter than you need it to be. I almost want to just keep going straight here. Make this a long right-hander. The same here. That, and then you make it like a sort of open chicane sort of thing. I feel like I would do this sort of thing completely differently. Then 10-degree banking for T6, which I assume is this bit. interesting. I feel like it's banking for like the sake of banking. Like it's more there. I won't say it's more there because you want it to be there, because at least there's a historical significance for it. And you can justify for that. Like, I'd be tempted to do the same sort of thing. So, yeah, that's fine. That said, you want it to be sort of historical, but it looks like you've killed all the remaining remnants of the banking as well. Which, if you want this section to be, if focus to be historic, I feel like getting rid of the actual historic parts. I'm not really sure if that's the move. And then T78 acting as a separator. Interesting concept to actually make sure the cars are split up. Generally not something I'd go for. Overall, I feel like the corner's just a bit too tight. A bit too tedious, kind of gets in the way. I would definitely have this more open. I like the meandering left and right kinks. I would definitely keep that concept. But I'd want to make this corner a lot faster or just generally different. And turn 3 is much faster. As long as it's still on the limit here, I think this is fine, but I feel like it might be a tad too easy in current F1 machinery, so maybe I tighten it slightly. And I know you say you don't want it to be like the old T3, but honestly, that possibly could be what you need to do there. And the brakes 180 not 180 100 are a bit easier as well and a bit faster onto the approach, which I don't mind. I think that'll work all fine. Then T14. I think I spaced these kinks up a bit more. And I think that brings my attention to another issue this has. Like, look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Kind of look at that as well. You've used the same corner complex three and a half times on the track, which I really... I don't know. I'm there's corner complexes being similar and then them being near identical, and especially here and here they feel near identical, and it's, I don't know. I feel like you need to do something different there on one of these two terms, preferably here, to make it feel a bit less samey. And here, I don't mind this change. I feel like I would almost keep the original corner here, maybe a bit earlier so it doesn't go on for as long. I want that to be more of a testing corner, like to push the driver to get it right rather than just this. I feel like this might just be a bit easy. I like this hairpin as well. It's not bad, though I feel like it runs to the same issue of being repetitive. I won't call it a clone of well, it is just the hairpin, but it pushes the limit, and especially with these, I feel like you don't want to be pushing the limit of repetitiveness if you're already on it, because then it's very easy to go over. And then this last corner, double apex 90s. Now I like that, especially since it's uphill as well. I think that adds a lot. You call it like Hockenheim. I don't think it's as spaced out as Hockenheim, but it's, I do like it. I like this sending section. It's a challenge. And it looks satisfying to drive as well. So overall, not a complete shambles, but I'm not really feeling it with this side. I feel like there's a lot you could do better. Like this for opening section especially. These bits are all right, but I think the sections here, it's a bit of a fumble. And to be honest, then we will take another swig while we take a quick look at Teddy's Korea International Circuit. So the second layout that's been reversed. One thing I'm noticing already, you've reversed the layout, but you haven't. It doesn't feel like you've changed the runoff in a lot of corners to compensate. Like I'm noticing it here, I'm noticing it here, here, and here. Of course, since there's grandstands at least all the way up through this section, it can be difficult, but and paddock here, but in half the cases I think it's fine, like the hairpin here, it's probably fine. Here it might be fine, but like here and here, it's questionable. Zone 1 and 2 is a chicane. There's an overtaking spot to improve safety. I can see that being done for overtaking, yeah, and yeah, it does increase safety. Again, it's kind of... I think I can see it's made to fit within the bounds of the original circuit, which I think goes for all of this in general, so that's why the runoff is a bit questionable. It's all within the bounds of the original circuit, which in this case, I don't think you can do much better than the chicane if you're keeping yourself to that restriction. If not, you can definitely do better, but I think you can justify it here. And I need to consider that for the rest of the layout too. So turn 4, T5, T6. Another one of those sections where I think you need to be able to drive before you can refine it properly. But the concept here is interesting. I think the flow coming through here would actually be rather nice, actually. Yeah, truth be told, decent flow until you get to like here. I feel like this corner comes up a bit quickly. And then there's nothing to do here, but that's more so you keeping to the original layout more than anything. So yeah, that works. T7 moved away from the wall for a safety reason, that's fine. Makes overtaking to T8 easier. You are not overtaking there, but that changes all right because of the safety aspect, and I think it makes the flow through here a bit better too. T10 and T11 move towards the inside wall, which actually does explain why this feels a bit more weird. A bit more of a straight there. Because the actual corner sequence is like there. And again, that's you keeping towards the original bounce of the circuit. I want to have the corner almost where the original was because I know I can push the walls out here. And it just flows back into that section. Then you've changed these sections to be a bit more flowing in the opposite direction, which, yes, nothing wrong with that at all. I'm fine as is. I maybe change this bit slightly so the hairpin's more out this way and, of course, change the angle slightly so it's more open. But no, that's fine as is too. I'd want to change this to make it a bit more interesting, but since you're thoroughly in the bounds of the original circuit, I guess that's alright too. That's more so in a complaint against the original circuit than you specifically. So I want to do my change and make it better as well. Added a kink here, tiny bit weird, but alright. Late apex, double apex. Yeah, again, that's where you get safety concerns, I think, here with the rule being so close. Not safety concerns per se, but I feel like this isn't optimal and you shouldn't really be going for this. But again, as for the rest of the changes for the circuit, it's keeping strictly within the bounds for the original runoff for the circuit. I won't go through the alternate layouts in that much detail, though I think they work. I think maybe change this slightly, the apex here, to make it more fast, and maybe make this corner stand out a bit more too, make it a tad more interesting in some way. Here. Again, this is kind of weird. I wouldn't do it as is because I'd have this corner changed and then know more nicely into there too. But other than that, yeah, that's alright. This is a little weird, but I don't think it's that much of an issue. So, given the bounce that you've restricted yourself to, I don't think you could really have done much better. I think in the voting this will suffer because you've restricted yourself a bit too much and had to make too many compromises. But yeah, for the restrictions that you have given yourself towards, like keeping within the bounds of the original runoff, I don't think you can really do much better. I think the only real areas of concern for me are this hairpin, but even then it's not that much, so good job, Teddy. Next is Pogger's Korea International Circuit. Keeps the original layout. So, ball water. My voice isn't liking it today. I was hoping I could do all of these in one go, but once again, I'm going to have to pause once we get to here, which is unfortunate. And look at that, all Koreas. Good representation for this Korean market. So you've changed this into a very 180 degree corner. Makes the first corner more interesting. Yeah, it'll do that. Improves racing for the filing straight. Maybe. First corner could have been, as is, could have been fine. I say you've changed that. Okay, you said people have said stuff about the pit exit, but not you specifically. I think the pit exit is almost would be worse because the corner itself is quicker, and if you have a moment out of the second part, you're just running over that pit lane. Well, I don't think it was that specifically was really a concern for the original. It was more so people outbreaking themselves at the original T1. But even then, is there a wall there? There's not. Okay. See. Right, then that's an improvement at least for you. Then free widen on entry. Looks a bit weird, but it's fine. Again, it's got the same issues, the IRL code as chicanes, but that's not the end of the world. I don't mind it too much. Then T changed into double apex corner because you don't like it. You admit it's a change for the sake of change, and that's fine. Not even that. Like, you're just flat out saying, I do not like it. Which is fair. We've all done that at least once. Change the corner, not because there's anything wrong with it, but we just don't really, like, personally are repulsed by it. That said, flow-wise, it's still awkward because I don't feel like you get enough time to set up for the two kinks there. That said, if I'm wrong and you do have the space, that definitely works. And you've just got enough breathing room that the corners here flow nicely as well. And this bit's all different. You've added a stadium section, which is a kink here, two kinks there. That's all. That flow can be a bit weird. It looks a bit weird, but flow's probably alright. Except when you get to here, I feel like you say you've changed T10 because it's awkward and you don't like it. Well, I want you to change this hairpin here because it looks awkward and I don't like it. I feel like it just kills the flow. You need this to be a lot more open here, and it makes the left-handers here a tiny bit more interesting because you're doing a bit more actual turning there. Honestly, I'd be very tempted to just bypass the stadium section altogether and just use these kinks. I think it'd work fine. Well, the layout mainly, the pit entry would definitely be more awkward in that case because you haven't accounted for that. But that's fine because I don't think you need to. That's not your intention for that pit lane to really be used. Not that alternate layout to really be used for anything major, I don't think. That pit lane. I mean, optimally, of course, you wouldn't want to do this, but for the sake of this competition, I think, yeah, alright, it's fine. I'll raise you by. That's okay, long stretch, is it? Ah, no, that's the alt. So yeah, overall simple changes. I do not vibe with this corner here at all, but the rest is alright. I'm not so sure about this bit and this bit too, but it's probably fine. I don't think they're too bad. It's really, this sticks out like a sore thumb, almost literally. It looks like a thumb. Yeah, could be worse. It's not. It does more things right than it does wrong. I'll give you that. It's actually brilliant if you can just bypass it, I think. But yeah. And big bridge by another easy. I agree with this assessment here. Spacing all your sections out nicely can be a real virtue. Of course, it's situational, but generally speaking, yeah, this is a good point here. So instead, he's made T3 follow the alt layout here and then connects to the other alt layout. Now, I would definitely do this tad differently. I think this kink at the end of T4 is really awkward, makes that section a bottleneck. I would definitely have it more opened out. Like, have the corner almost where it is, open the apex slightly, and then comes out to here, and then you've got a right hand kink and then a left hand there. Obviously, you need to change the short layout slightly. But yeah. And it makes these two corners very interesting. You problem is runoff on the exit of it is, I don't think that's grade 1 runoff there. Even if you throw all the money of the world at the FIA, I don't think they allow that. It's just far too little. And then I feel like these T5, T6 kinks could be refined a bit more. I think they're fine as is. You just want them right on the limit, and this first kink isn't really on the limit. I don't think this T6 one is. Again, refinement and actually driving it. And everything remains the same. This run actually works into the hairpin beautifully here. I think that'd be great for overtaking, assuming you can follow through what would be a very high downforce dependent section. And T12 would be interesting, because I think it'll be rising up too, or this is a valley. Actually, if that rises, that makes that interesting. But again, much like the exit of T4, the exit of T12, the runoff there, you just can't get away with that in grade 1. Hell, even grade 2 tracks I don't think would allow you that. That's just too dodgy. This corner alone disqualifies you from grade 1. This corner disqualifies you, I think, from grade 2. It's just, those angles are just that dodgy. Though that said, if you ignore that, this would be interesting, because you're rising and then you're falling away into this braking zone here, into this right-left-hander, which, again, I bring up the refinement point, but as is, I think it looks damn near perfect. That's very beautifully crafted there. Now, I think this left hand is a bit tight, but otherwise this whole bit works fine as well. Just needs the apex open slightly. So yeah, again, you decided to do something a bit out of the box. There's some sections I would open up, and there are some sections where the runoff is just no capiche. You can't do this. This does not work for grade 1. But if you ignore those parts, I like this. I do very much like some of the concepts you've done here. This here especially, this is a beautiful section. Not the most interesting to drive, I think, but for racing, it works very well. And I think for driving as well, it just doesn't do anything wrong. It doesn't feel awkward or anything like that. It just feels like a nice part to drive. Then last one in this part, it's by Fishman Simple Parts. Write in T1 and 2 to allow for more side-by-side racing. Yeah, alright. Write an entry 10-3 to allow for dive bombs. Yeah, not the first one to do this. Alright. Write in T5 and T6 at apex to make it easier for a car to keep fighting there. Maybe. Makes it better. Opening up the radii there does make it better for cars to keep going side by side, but since it makes the corners less tight, it could compromise racing a little bit. Honestly, it's hard to visualize this, so maybe it's an improvement, maybe it's not. It's hard to tell. But it definitely could be. We profile T9 to be slightly faster. I don't think this change is really necessary, unless you're still right on the limit here. Because if I go back to career here, scroll back up to the blip blip. Actually, maybe opening is the right idea, because this looks a bit tight. You're having to shift down a couple of gears for this corner. Maybe you've gone a bit too far with it, but think the concept is a step in the right direction, and right into you tend to be slightly faster. Again, I think I keep it tight here, but flows nicely for T9, so it's fine. It's all right. And increase runner for T14 and 15, all right. Generally hard to mess up with increased runoff. And then T15 and 16 is now a single corner, which is by far the most significant change you've actually made. Again, it is one that's hard to actually tell if it works or not from a top-down perspective. It looks like it could be tedious. It looks like it could maybe just line up just right. Once again, for the millionth time, you need to be able to drive it to really determine whether you've done this right or you need to change it up a bit. So, compared to some of these ones, this is a very, what's the word? I'll say conservative here. It's not quite the word I'm looking for, but I guess the point across. It's very conservative, down to earth. It barely makes any changes, any significant changes, but the changes it does make, it's more for refinement and optimization than anything else, and that's nice. It won't win any competition, I don't think. It won't really stand out here, especially with the visuals. It's kind of, you can see it's a bit lazily put together in that respect, but I just want to be able to appreciate, like, keeping things simple, only making, like, the changes absolutely, I won't say absolutely necessary. That's not the point I'm going towards. The point is, you're looking at these sections, you're just looking at them. Maybe I can make this a tad bit better. Maybe I can make this a tad bit, well, I don't want to say tad bit better tries, that's kind of repetitive, but, you know, that gets the point across. Just little refinements. It doesn't make a massive impact overall, but it does improve things, and I do appreciate this from this entry. So simplicity can be fantastic, and Fishman has shown that here, I believe. Still, I would question this section a bit, but otherwise, and maybe this too, but otherwise, yeah. I like the mindset here. So with that, as I said, I wanted to do with this in all one go, but my throat is just not feeling up for it, so I suppose I will stop here for now and re-record part 2 later. So, of course, if you stuck around here to now, thank you for watching and listening. Hope you're looking forward to part 2, and I will see you next time.